So I was older, I was a woman, and I was in tech in London. That was really totally foreign to all the investors. And so when I came here, I won a contest and came here and pitched at the Funded.com showcase. And unfortunately, after a series of misadventures, I actually hit the wall and couldn't go any further. And I had made a commitment in Ireland years before to help women raise venture when I was successful. So I thought, oh, I'll do it now that I failed. And when I look back on it, oh my God, I would never have been able to do what I did if I'd been successful, because literally that year was so intense. I worked 24/7 and I did everything. I did the interviews, the scripts, the networking with VCs and entrepreneurs, and editing and uploading, and it literally took all my time. So there was no way I could have ever done that project. And I think also in some way I must have been meant to fail, if there's such a thing as destiny, because that year I saw incredible changes as regards awareness about female entrepreneurs. And of course you all see the results now, even a year further, so it's 2 years now, over 2 years. Of how much awareness there is now in the community, particularly here, about female entrepreneurs, but also right across the globe, actually. So there's lots of initiatives and awarenesses. So obviously that was the time, and I was one of the drips in the puddle of bringing that awareness up. So what my intent was just to really hear everyone's side of the story from both sides of the table. And that's literally what I had to do. I sort of had to shut up with my own ideas and judgments and listen to what everyone had to say. And my feeling is that what happened is that all those ideas and perceptions met in the middle, and there we found the truth. So obviously we all contribute to that ultimate truth. So then I put an ebook together of a whole lot of the videos, short videos, and that was my summary. But my commitment is to continue to promote that, because if that resource had been around 7 years ago when I was in this whole process, I would have been over the moon to be able to physically see investors and see their opinions about things, and also get ideas from female entrepreneurs about getting funded. So I could just continue to talk when I'm asked, or reach out to media. And just recently a Malaysian entrepreneur approached me just to get a little bit of advice, and I got her to put an infographic together, which is the first infographic on women being invested in, and also female venture capitalists. I've got now a page on my site for female venture capitalists, and I try and promote them, because one of the pieces in the research shows that the more female venture capitalists there are, the more women get funded. And that's not because female venture capitalists favourite women, but usually they get the ideas that the women bring in, and there's not as many obstacles. But they do tend to try and overprove themselves that they're not favouriting women. So it's not a sort of jobs for the girls type situation. So that's my main piece at the moment, is promoting female venture capitalists. So I started off a business in Ireland. I was in Ireland for 9 years, and then I went into online business out of some TV and radio work that I was doing there, and moved to London. So I've been sort of removed from my roots, Australian roots, for a long time now. In fact, when I went back in 2009, I felt weak at the knees because I couldn't fit in anymore. So I've been here just over two and a half years. So what I'd like to do is, I'm just going to basically go through some of the summaries, and these are not my ideas, but more what people brought to the table in the interviews. And I basically weaved them all together and got a sort of a pretty fair idea of what goes on for women when they go to get invested, and how the VCs might see us as well. This means that I'm going to be using generalisations. And one VC said to me, you can't generalise, and unfortunately we all tend to do that, and so My apologies right at the outset that I am going to generalise. Okay, so some of the issues that came up that that people felt that stopped women from being funded or going for venture capital to start with. Many women go for angel investment, and I think they say now that there's about 10% of the angel investments that are happening are women entrepreneurs or women founders, and I think it's just still 5 to 7% as far as venture goes. So venture seems to be a bigger step for most female entrepreneurs. Some of the points that were brought up was, and I'm going to put them in a question form because I'd really like if anyone's got any comments or ideas about that you contribute to the conversation. So are we slow to adapt to male-dominated industries? Are we aggressive enough? Do we listen to others too much? And can we ask for what we want? So these were some of the issues that were brought by investors as well as by women. Yeah?
Can you just share what kind of businesses are going for VC? Were they primarily tech or?
Yeah, basically technical, they're all technology businesses that I was looking at, yeah. Not bricks and mortar.
So I was at a thing at Google I/O, and they had Dave McClure was speaking. He's like he's angel investor, 500 stars.
He's the disruptor of the industry.
Yeah. So he's talking. He says, women businesses, like women are way more than 50% of the spend.
Exactly.
We are very interested in women, not necessarily women-owned businesses, but startups, tech things that appeal to women and children. So things that are child-based or things that are, targeting women. And so this conference had about 300 people in the room, 200, and he said, how many people are developing an app? 200 people raised their hands. How many people are developing an app for women and children? 2 people raised their hands. I went and spoke to both of them. One woman actually was doing this thing in fashion, and this one guy said, oh no, I just did it to look cool. So like that whole room of 200 developers, they're all like dorky games and stuff so like there's so much opportunity I think for people to
target women.
Yeah. And it shouldn't women be targeting women.
Can I just add that I'm from Canada. I moved here 6 weeks ago with my tech startup. And and my startup's called Just Be Friends, and it is for children. It's where I match children for friendship, and it's the social education of our kids has to reflect and has to include our parents and the adults again in the room. So anyway, I'm at these events, and I'm like, okay, there's no lineup for the bathroom, which is fantastic. But I'm Canadian, and we have a very different cultural difference between how men and women interact versus the United States, and you wouldn't think that was so. And I've had people ask me to get them coffee, which I find interesting because they think I'm a waitress. I've had guys think that I was going to be there for the babe booths. It's just been a very interesting thing. And so further to that, you're right, there is not enough women in these spaces. And certainly when I was like, well, I was a hell of a waitress when I was a teenager, but I'm kind of not in that anymore, but I appreciate you asking me to get you coffee. So it's just really interesting to me that there is these things that are still going on in these spaces and these differences between our genders. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you wanted to say?
Yeah, could you clarify? You said, David McClure said that he wasn't necessarily interested in the women being owners, but interested in what...
I think he'd be perfectly happy.
Okay.
Oh, no, he totally. He did an interview with me, and he said he totally was really open to women founders because he was ahead of the game before the other VCs got involved, and he's made a lot of money out of it. Yeah.
And he's now really pushing.
He's smart.
If you go to his site, he's pushing right now to find women investors who will invest in women in tech.
Dave McClure from 500 Startups. There is a process you have to go through to get invested by him. You have to get a mentor, which is on his website, on your side, and then they basically will take you to see whether or not you qualify. One of the really big things that people kept saying was, are we risk averse? And I definitely think that women again generalising, often see risk in a different way. And some women said, well, you know, some of us have families, so we can't just go and burn through untold cash, and we can't mortgage our homes, you know, different sort of restrictions. Whereas men tend to maybe not see that or feel as responsible as women would as regards their families. So that seems to be something that held them back. But I love this quote by Gloria Steinem. Someone asked me why women don't gamble as much as men do, and I gave the sensical reply that we don't have as much money. And that was a true and incomplete answer. In fact, women's total instinct for gambling is satisfied by marriage. Oh, that was brilliant. Okay, so some of the pros and cons. We tend to be trained to care for others, and we're the only sex that can have babies and breastfeed. So to date, anyway, you know, I'm sure they're going to invent it so men can do that soon, but not to date. We're the only ones. We're great to work for because we care. We can subvert our egos, and now a lot of the VCs actually spoke about that women don't tend to be as egotistical or pushing their ego when they come to pitch, and that in a way there's two guards here. Some of the VCs like that absolutely strident, egotistical sort of, I can do this and I can solve those problems and I can make all these millions of dollars. They like that pushiness, and then some of the others say, well, you know, obviously that's unrealistic, and at some point they're going to have to sort of hit the wall of reality and get a bit more pragmatic. But they did tend to say that women don't tend to be as egotistical or pushy. And someone who I guess everyone's heard of is Cindy Gallo. She said that everything conspires to leave us feeling insecure. So part of how we're trained and our culture, and I have seen and helped out a lot at ASTIA, which is a women's organisation, watching women pitch, and I do notice that you know, they might have a fabulous business and they get up on the stage and they totally let themselves down when they actually go to do the pitching. Obviously that's what ASTIA is there for. They, you know, once you've invested in their membership, they'll support you and coach you. But I think that somehow, and one of the things that a friend of mine who was a lecturer in Melbourne at La Trobe University, he said that women often don't feel that what they've achieved is because of themselves. They often will give credit to everything around them. And at that stage I was doing radio shows in Melbourne, and how the conversation came up was, he said, oh, that was really a great conversation you had on the radio the other night. And I was like, oh yes, but that was because blah, 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 blah. And I immediately did exactly, and that's when he says, I've noticed this with women, that, you know, a guy would go, yeah, I was really great, wasn't I? You know? And there I was, like, throwing it away. So, you know, I think that for me, I'm obviously much longer in the tooth than a lot of you, but I've spent most of my life really trying to build a sense of self up and get some clear idea about what it is I can do and what I can't do, my weaknesses and my strengths. Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that because my daughter just started kindergarten. She's in the 5th grade, and she's doing fabulously, but I'm getting all of this great feedback, and since I'm now an entrepreneur, I'm much more conscious about my ability to take credit and own it.
Good. So
they're saying she's so fabulous, and I saw myself dismissing her accomplishment, you know, because that was my habit. And because I'm so much more conscious about it for myself, I caught myself up short. For Christ's sake, my mother taught, I mean, you know, we're teaching our daughters to be that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a clarity-giving moment. It wasn't a mystery why. I didn't let her, I do now, I mean, now I'm more conscious of it, so I tell them the story to make them proud, but it caught me up short, because I'm such a...
So did you take your daughter to see the movie Brave?
No, I haven't seen the movie.
Okay, anyone that's got children, you've got to take them to see that movie or get it out if it's out. It's so exciting because I was a therapist years ago, a Jungian therapist, and it really is speaking about a real change in the collective. And that is the first movie, or animated movie obviously, where a woman has been, a girl has been a heroine, and you know, she hasn't had the low-cut dress on and getting married or anything like that. She was out there fighting with the guys and being as skillful and smart as the guys. And I just, when I had to see it because I'd seen the previews, and I just thought, this is a real statement about what's coming out of the collective, about this is a really exciting time for us to be women. You know, we're all doing what we can to contribute to this change in awareness of, you know, and possibilities for your daughters, but also for ourselves right now. You know, much more possibilities than when I was young. So I think it's an exciting time, and that's a great movie just to inspire young girls and us older people that things are really changing and that we don't have to look at it in the same way. The story's very good because the mother has to get converted basically to a whole new way of seeing things. So it's very symbolic. It's great.
I just want to make
yes.
just one more comment about what you guys are saying about this.
Yeah.
There is some balance to be sought in that, but it's a very fine line. I don't think it's a good idea for women to take on ego head. I think it's a beautiful thing that we point to each other and include others in our success.
Good point.
That is the strength that women have. And that, more than anything, should be addressed as a source of pride for us, rather than how much more like men can we be. We got
exactly.
enough of that.
That's a good point. Yeah, definitely. One thing that was mentioned was that, you know, we do have a lot more self-awareness, and there was a couple of my favourite VCs who spoke about this. But we do tend to reflect and look within a lot more, say, than men do, and that can be a strength, but it can be a weakness as well, because sometimes we can second guess ourselves and, you know, undermine ourselves, and so we definitely do need to look at that. So it can be a cost or benefit. What happens is sometimes we would look within, whilst men generally look without, and they get energised when they get rejected. How many people in here get energised when you get rejected? None? Well, actually, I'm going to put my hand halfway up, because as I've become more aware over the years, I've noticed that there's some sort of testosterone hit that I get, and I come out fighting after I get rejected or knocked down. And, you know, that's what this project was all about, obviously, too, was like, oh my God, I'm going to slip my wrist, and then, oh well, I could actually try this, and then, yay, gung-ho, and out I go, fighting for another year, you know. So I wouldn't have known that about myself, but years ago when I was young, but now I see it. I see that sometimes when I get knocked down. Now, this is a general pattern with men. And all the VCs talk about this, that often when they go in there bragging and blustering, and the VCs just tell them to, you know, get out, or they're no good or whatever, they actually, so what else can I do? You know, they come back and they don't take no for an answer, and I'm like, oh gee, I'm not even that brave, you know. So I think that we have to, again, not be like men, but we have to be aware of all of this stuff. And each of us, I'm talking in very general terms, but each of us have our own individual story and our own individual predispositions that we need to be aware of.
I might just add one comment on that. So if you want a good book, there's a book called Women Don't Ask. You know, when a friend gave it to me to read, she's like, here, you know, a box of Kleenex because you'll be weeping for all the things we've left on the table. And it's just, what I appreciated about it is just an awareness about your own, my own expectations, but also society's expectations, interpretations of how we all come to the table. And it really helped from an awareness perspective. And it's one that you can pick out the read chapters and abandon it and come back. Women Don't Ask. It's a great quote.
Everyone get that. Another quote. This is from Lady Gaga. When I wake up in the morning, I feel just like any other insecure 24-year-old girl. And then I say, bitch, you're Lady Gaga. You get up and walk the walk today. I love it. So even Lady Gaga has her moments. So now I brought in, this is really my little theory, but it's, again, I'm quite fascinated by this with my psychological background and coaching background. But also I did happen to see the documentary last night from Discover on, you know, the chemistry of sex. And actually my last startup was a matching algorithm that was for dating sites. So I'm quite fascinated about the actual chemistry, and you probably all heard of Helen Fisher, who's done a lot of work, and Match.com obviously latched onto her and used her work about the hormones that happen, different hormones in men and women. So this is probably what's underneath my theory, but you know, if you think about testosterone, which men have more of, it builds up their bone and muscle mass. But I think it also possibly builds up a psychological thick skin, because they definitely can take a lot more. Now again, I'm generalising, and you can find very sensitive men, and I have a lot of them as friends, a lot of gay men. But generally, if we're generalising, that definitely, if you've got more testosterone, you will happen, even if you're a woman, you'll probably find that you're a bit tougher and can take a lot of the knocks more than, say, women that have a lot of estrogen. And obviously the estrogen supports the female body for fertility and caring for babies. But I also feel that it supports feminine intuition and sensitivity. You know, in a way, that's how we've survived for centuries of protecting our young, is to know things before they're going to happen that we wouldn't find out through our mind. That instinct of knowing that baby's cry is yours, you know, amongst all the other babies. So I had a couple of VCs say that, and one in particular say that he only had one woman on his team at the time, but he said always she got stuff that all the other men around the table didn't pick up about entrepreneurs and businesses. So he said it's basically the feminine intuition. He even used the words. Now he's probably, he's third generation, or second generation, but I think his son's also now in venture. So there's 3 generations of them, and so he's got a pretty stable foundation, can say what he likes. But I think also it's quite the truth that we should access and could access our intuition in building our businesses, that it's not something wrong with it. Maybe you don't bandy it around and say, oh, you know, I trusted my intuition or gut on that. But and men would use different terminology, but I don't think that generally they have access to that sort of information. And do you know, being entrepreneurs and having startups, and particularly when you start talking about getting investment and funding, it's huge risk that you're talking about, really huge. And that's why a lot of women have been slow to come on board and think about doing startups. They might run their own business or consultancy, but to do a startup is very different. You've got to call forth all the ammunition you've got, all the talents you've got. And I have to say that I'm totally reliant on my intuition these days. And I think it's great. So you brought up earlier, but I did ask the question, should we play like the boys? And one of the things that all the VCs say is that they need entrepreneurs to be authentic and have integrity and to be themselves. So if you go in there and you're pretending to be someone else, you probably won't get the funding from that investor. The other thing is, harking back to my online dating days, how can you get a really good match if you lie on your profile or you pretend to be someone else, which of course is a huge problem in the online dating world still, I think, even though I'm totally out of touch with it. But, you know, if you lie and pretend to be someone else, either by a, slimmer photo or a younger face or just some bullshit that you write in your profile, you're not going to get the right match because they're going to be matching with someone that's not you. Now, this generally doesn't happen in the women's side of things, but does happen a lot with the guys. Maybe the flattering photo piece might happen. I know I was even tempted to that after I put on weight. So, but still, you don't really get an authentic match. So it's the same with going in for investment. That person across the table is a human being to start with, and that was the aim of one of the aims of my videos. If he gives you funding or she gives you funding, you're going to be working with that person. It's like a marriage, and a lot of the VCs say that it is like a marriage. It's like a business partnership, and you have to, at the very least, like them, and they have to like you. Just that initial chemistry. And you have to be able to communicate with them, and sometimes just naturally we have some problems with certain people, but it's hard for them either to hear you or you to hear them, or to be able to assert yourself with them. So if any of those just very basic problems occur, you get out of there. It's not worth your time, wasting your time.
So I think it's interesting because I toy with a little startup. You have to be honest here. I have a family and a kid, and I don't want to be working 24/7. I need to spend time. And it's not like a job interview where they can't ask you.
Yeah.
Like, my understanding is they expect you to be working like dogs for their money, and you can't say, well, you...
So I beg to disagree there. I think the work-life balance, you're right, is totally out of whack in the entrepreneurial field. But Deo Resi said to me in his interview that the fact is that men created the startup culture, and that's why it is the way it is.
Yeah.
And what's happening now with more women coming in is that it's on us to change that. If men started it because it was mainly just men anyway, then if we're coming in, we've all got to do our bit to change that. And individually, I think what we've got to do is to create a working culture for ourselves in our own startups that works for you and your family or whatever, as long as,
And you think if you're pitching, you're like, and this is, like, if it's a good idea,
I think
and this is it.
I think you have to be clear about that work-life balance before you get into that pitch. Basically, you have to be clear about what your limits are. And there is one interview with Jennifer Toney on my site, who's a mompreneur, and she said some great things about being smart about work-life balance. Like, there's some things you're not going to be able to do, and you work out what your priorities are, and you cut them, and so you spend time with your kid, and then you work at certain hours. I mean, you have to get creative, and I think it is true. You just have to be creative. I raised 3 children by myself. My marriage broke up when my youngest wasn't 2, so 5 to 2 or 1, and I didn't even have financial support from my ex-husband. So what I had to do, I had to be really innovative because I was in my own practice, and I guess I ran the house like a military camp, one of my girlfriends said, but I'd have them all washed and in bed and fed, and then I was having groups and classes in the living room, and I did it, I worked it all out. So I created my own boundaries, I guess is what I'm saying.
But to that point, you can't get funding unless you're showing that you have traction already, so you will have already been working it. I mean, they won't fund ideas anymore like they did in the past. So if you've already been working it up until now, you've already shown that you have some sort of balance. And I think you would go forth to them with funding, knowing that it's gotten this far as being a mom and the startup. In process.
There's also there's a great VC in LA called Mark Suster, who I totally recommend his blog, although he hasn't been writing for the last 8 months because he was getting a fund together. But he is a great educator about that stuff, and he said to me, he did write a blog post years ago, and then he said to me in the interview that you must talk about the elephant in the room when you get in to see the investor. If you're 20-something, you haven't started having a family, you've got to talk about what your plans are around that. You don't just let it slide, because basically it's going to be talked about anyway. They're going to go back to the partner and say, oh, she's just going to turn around and have babies and leave the company. And you probably all heard that big clamour on the internet last year when co-founder Jessica Jackley, who used to be the co-founder of Kiva, one of her investors in LA wrote a blog post when he found out she was pregnant with twins, and said that she was going to he was worried that she was going to let her startup down. And there was a huge furor, and everyone was like writing comments